This morning, the outrage over this video is growing. A white police officer drawing his gun as a black suspect runs away, his back turned. The officer fires 8 shots. The suspect, Walter Scott, is killed.
223, dispatch, shots fired. Subject is down. He grabbed my taser.
A bystander's chilling video then shows North Charleston officer Michael Slager.
All right, then let's get to work. Our guest is a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel who has spent the last 11 years fighting for a higher and more responsible level of policing. Because in 2004, his unarmed son was shot and killed by Wisconsin police during a struggle. Let's welcome back Mike Bell. And from the side of law enforcement, let's also welcome back former NYPD officer and investigative blogger John Cardillo. Gentlemen, I thank you both for being here today.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks for the invite. Yeah.
John, as a former cop, let me get to you. Was this an execution?
I don't want to go as far as saying execution, but it certainly does not look like a lawful or in policy shooting. And from what I see on the video, I have to agree with the officer being charged. And the investigation, I think, was handled properly. The video was released after the investigation. I don't know one cop backing Officer Slager today.
What would then, and again, understanding this, you haven't met the man, we don't know him, and we are all doing a lot of suppositioning here today, if you will. What could possibly have been going through an officer's mind for an unarmed man at that age running away from him to multiple fire?
I have no idea. I mean, from what the reports indicate, this was a non-felony car stop. It was a relatively innocuous offense, a broken taillight. He exited his vehicle, ran. His family says it's because of outstanding child support warrants for which he had been arrested in the past. That typically warrants a foot pursuit and radioing a few additional units. I honestly have no idea why 8 rounds were fired.
That, I guess, is the point here, John. What is it? Because there's often that case where the officer says that there is a fear for my life. But again, I'm asking, and I'm pulling on your professional experience here. Someone afraid of their life at someone moving away from them and firing 8 shots. That seems incredibly excessive and should be something that is always taught to not have to fire at a fleeing individual who's unarmed.
Oh yeah, I have to agree, and that is taught. I mean, in no deadly use of deadly force scenario that I've ever been taught has that been considered acceptable. This person was not in particularly good physical shape. From what the video indicates, it didn't appear to be difficult for the officer to run after him and physically apprehend him. So again, I can't see any evidence on that video that would justify this shooting, and I feel the charges are appropriate at this point.
Mike, I come to you next. I would have to guess that when you saw this, it made you sick to your stomach.
It did make me sick to my stomach and immediately brought back memories of what happened to my own son. Luckily, there was video to capture this in this day and age. When my son was killed, there was only 5 eyewitnesses, and there was words of the officers against my family members and the witnesses. I feel very strongly for the parents of Mr. Scott.
When you get to this point, Mike, and knowing what you've been through and your family's been through, and you see this video, is maybe one of the first things that comes to your mind is, why won't you learn? Why won't law enforcement learn a better way of doing things? How many people have to die?
That's exactly right. There has to be a cultural shift. I don't think the older officers are going to make that shift. I think the shift has to come in with the new recruits going through the academy and so forth. These types of incidents need to be used as training scenarios to help promote safety for future incidents like this.
When we talk about training, John, I've only got about 40 seconds and we take a break, come back. But when we talk about training, isn't it just endemic? Isn't it logical that things like this would have been trained already? Not this specific incident, but issues like this to cops.
Yes. And like I said, the police officers are trained not to do this. My heart goes out to the colonel's family, but this is one incident in about 600,000 law enforcement officers. So I don't like to paint the entire profession with that broad brush when one bad incident jumps off.
Now, I want you to hold on to that because, again, as I said, we're coming down to a break. But what you just said, and I've made this very clear, that I am a supporter of law enforcement, but I am also somebody who looks at when a crime has been committed and it has to be said out loud. What you just said, 1 in maybe 600,000, That's a very specific point that I think we need to talk to, and certainly Mike and you can both discuss that. Please stand by, gentlemen, just a moment here, because the difference between an officer-involved shooting turning into cold-blooded murder, what happens when police procedure goes out the window, and then we do need to discuss the fact of just one or two bad eggs, but who make fatal mistakes and need to be punished for it. Next on MidPoint. The police shooting of an unarmed man captured on video that has the entire nation talking, so let's get back to it. Welcome back, former NYPD Officer John Cardillo and law enforcement activist seeking to change how cops and community work together, Lieutenant Colonel Mike Bell. Lieutenant Colonel, I want to ask you this because I checked. Milwaukee Police Chief Edward Flynn was quoted as saying that in 2012, and they've had their own problems in Milwaukee, but he said that nearly 12.2 million arrests in 2012, only 410 uses of deadly force in America with law enforcement. Now, I realize even one is bad, even one is wrong, but do we not have to, when we have these conversations, pull back just a touch and remember that what we're talking about in your son's case and in the case of this officer, these are individuals who made egregious mistakes, and it is not a broad brush of every single police officer. Would you agree with that?
You know, I am pro-police, but I am anti-corruption. But the problem is how many other cases like the Scott case are out there that there wasn't a video recording by a bystander in the background. We just don't know. And law enforcement needs to step up and demonstrate to the community and the nation that the system is clean. They need to support the body camera. They need to ask for an outside investigation. They need to ask for independent review. This is a time for change. And like I said, I do support law enforcement, and I'd like to see them step forward on it like they did in Wisconsin here.
Then, John, what is the thing that law enforcement needs to do right now? And let's get away from all the platitudes here. Let's get down to something real in places like this town, small towns, big towns. And don't just, and I please, I'm being respectful here, but don't please just tell me that we need to get people out in the community, because there's got to be something greater than that.
No, I'm not going to tell you that because I don't like platitudes either. I think in this case they did it. A very rapid and thorough investigation occurred and a prosecution ensued. What more can you do? Look, agencies the nation over have upgraded their use of force scenario training. Technology helps with that, right? I mean, we're in a different place than we were 20 years ago with regards to simunition training, video training that mimics real life scenarios almost identically. But again, you have hundreds of thousands of police officers, hundreds of millions of residents in the United States, millions of arrests a year. Look, I don't mean to be cavalier, but NASA lost 2 space shuttles. Find me any institution in life without a slight margin of error, and I'm going to find you an institution skewing their statistics. It would be disingenuous to say these things will never happen, because we don't have zero tolerance as human beings in the world. Zero tolerance is impossible.
But let me hit you with that, though. Let me hit you with a part of that, then. Knowing full well that this comes down to human beings making mistakes, and some police officers who have what I call the bullet head mentality, where they are in charge and they are the ones who are going to force themselves on you, do we not need to find those who, when they do have those aggressive moments, things happen immediately, no chance, out, you're done, you're fired. We have to get rid of these people who even show the slightest example of going over that line.
Well, yeah, Ed, but that's also budgetary, right? I mean, not every department is LAPD or NYPD with millions of dollars and a very robust internal affairs infrastructure.
Yeah, but that's awful tough for people to understand, though, John. You would understand. And I guess, Mike, let me get you to talk to that as well. When somebody mentions budget and we're talking about a human life, that's got to be something that chafes at you.
It does bother me. I see a lot of expenses coming out of our police department. I know our own county sheriff has a $77 million budget. So you're telling me that you have these huge numbers out there, but you can't make small concessions. So that's an issue for me also.
So how do we then solve that, Mike? I come back to you, Mike. How do we solve that? I know that you're working on things here, but the simple first step that has to get people back together.
There has to be 4 things, and the aviation industry is a model for this. Number 1, there has to be external investigation of police-involved mishaps. Number 2, there has to be an independent review to determine probable cause. Number 3, once that cause is determined, we have to determine whether the officer should be held accountable for lack of training or irresponsible behavior. And number 4, there needs to be a database that we can look at this from a great distance back and understand what really happened here, and should we modify our training or should we legislate a solution. Those are the 4 fundamentals I've been calling for. That's what we got passed in the state of Wisconsin. That's what I did in Missouri over the weekend. That's what needs to occur nationwide.
John, about 35 seconds I have left then. You as a former officer, what do you think of those 4 ideas?
I think they exist. I think we have outside review in terms of district and state attorneys. I think those statistics exist in the shape and form of the FBI Uniform Crime Stats. And I think we do outside 360 reviews of these scenarios. I'm never one for more oversight where it just becomes cluttered, or we run into situations where biased, agenda-driven groups that are anti-police look to jam police up.
But I don't think that's
groups.
what Mike is calling for here, but I do get the point. But overall, John, what you hear here on those 4 ideas, you agree with that for all police departments, yes?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
any review and of policy is always a good thing.
We have to continue this conversation because, and I hate to say this every time we have this, and we keep saying that it's going to happen again, and it did. Michael Bell, John Cardillo, I want to thank you both for being here today. I look forward to speaking again.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, take care. The city where the race relation conversation found new life. We return to Ferguson, Missouri, next on MidPoint.